All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Okay, what do we got on the agenda this evening? Well, a review of a pretty poor card, all things considered. UFC on ESPN Plus 121. We all knew it wasn't good. And we'll be previewing UFC on ESPN 73. It's not much better. Um, The UFC's doing a big thing about touting, like, yeah, look, the last pay-per-view, maybe ever, depending on who you listen to. It's going to be a big deal. It's in Madison Square Garden, and it's got two title fights and two former champions who vacated belts moving up in weight, trying to become two-weight world champions. Yeah, that's not the last card of the year, though, or the last card of the ESPN deal. What's that? Oh, right, that's main evented by, what, Amir Al-Bazi and, oh, jeez. No, Brandon Royval, sorry. It's main evented by Brandon Royval and Manel Kopp at the Warehouse. Royval and Kopp is a fine fight, by the way, for the record. But good grief, there is nothing else on that card. Okay, maybe one. I mean, Jamie Lynn Horth and Teresa Bleda is nothing. Steven Asplund and Sean Sharaf is nothing. Crappy heavyweights. Cesar Almeida and Cesare. That's not Cesare. I can't remember how that's pronounced, though. Oleg Sejik. I think this is Mikhail's brother. The other one potentially of interest here is Melchiazzel Costa and Morgan Chartier. That's a decent fight. Drew Anderson Brito and Melsik Bagdasarian. They're still trying to turn Bagdasarian into a thing. What a waste of everyone's time. Another crappy heavyweight fight. Alan Fry and Guillermo Pat. Juan Assange, Melissa Croden. Okay, Croden curious about. And Jillian Robertson versus Amanda Lemos. That card sucks. That card sucks out loud. Ugh. No, UFC 323 is gonna be great. Sorry, 322 is the Madison Square one. 323, I misspoke. That one's got that's Marab and Yan too, and Pantoja and Van, and yeah, it's gonna be great. We got two title fights, and I'm sure the pay-per-view portion of that will be good. What else is on that card, actually? Hang on. I don't care about Henry Cejudo and Peyton Talbot. I don't really care about Muhammad Naimov anymore. He's pretty good. He's got potential, but I need more than has been seen. I don't care about Macy Barber. I'm done with that. Marvin Vettori and Bruno Ferreira, maybe? Probably not. Edson Barboza and Jalen Turner, okay. That'll be decent. Grant Dawson and Manuel Torres will be okay. Crappy light heavyweight fight is crappy. Terrence McKinney doesn't usually have long fights, at least. Oh, Nazim Sadikov and Faris Siam's okay. Mansour Abdul Malek and Antonio Tricoli, that will suck. So, it'll probably have a. When they apportion that out properly, like figure out what's on the pay per view and what's not, that'll probably be okay, but I don't know. I don't know, guys. There's a celebratory atmosphere on some of this from the UFC that I just do not agree with. But I also have to watch everything, so when you watch everything, that changes your perspective on what you get excited about, doesn't it? All right. Anyway, sorry, that's a bit long on the intro side of things, isn't it? All right, that's yeah. There's not much news, maybe a little, but we'll kind of hash that out. Some news specifically related to the event last night that we will talk about when we get to that fight. But we'll see about that. Anyway, anything you do to interact with the product is always appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review. You all know the deal there. Mostly just thank you for listening. That is the most important component of all of this. Yeah, I think that's it for that. So let's get into this, shall we? And I just apologize for the slightly rambly intro there. So UFC on ESPN plus 121. Prediction wise, how did we do? 10 and 3. Um, what did I swap? I swapped to Del Valle. I'll tell you why when we get there. I think that was the only thing I changed. I didn't think Norma Dumont won that fight. Officially, she did. I didn't score it for her, but I'll take that on the spreadsheet. Alencar, Coe, Ardelian, Dumont, Johnson. Maybe should have figured on Timmy Kwamba against Lee. I got that wrong. I should have given Timmy Kwamba a little more credit. Um, yeah, I think that was it. The Garembo and Wells fight was just weird. I don't mind getting that one wrong. And the weirdness around Ante Delia and Waldo Cortez Acosta. I don't know. Got it wrong officially. Again, it was just kind of weird. We'll talk about it when we get there. So 10-3. I'm good with that. Year to date, that now puts me. Sorry, my spreadsheet is suddenly incorrect. All right. There we go. Okay, now it is accurate. All right. So 10-3 on that. Year to date makes me 337, 112, two draws, three no contests. So I'm feeling okay about that. Again, a little better than 3-1. I'd like that to be better overall. I don't know. I'm gonna think about what goal I might set for myself for next year, for when I do this again. So just where my head's at. So that's where we are, and I haven't had a negative card yet. That was my big goal last year, and I think I accomplished it. Either that or last year I had like one negative card, and then this year goal was none, and I haven't had one yet. So I forget exactly. Doesn't matter. So that's where we are. As for the fights themselves, main event, Steve Garcia beats David Onama fairly quickly. TKO, punches, started off with a front kick to the body that started the finishing sequence. 3:34 the first round. Steve Garcia is just very, very action oriented. He does a lot of forward motion and throws a lot. That was kind of the big deal here. David Onama is not a bad fighter, but Garcia in general tends to just give himself a lot of options or a lot of chances to do stuff that really matters. Which is that has downsides as a strategy, it really does. But MMA is an offensively oriented sport, especially the scoring. It rewards offense. So being a very offensive-minded, offensive-oriented fighter will take you places. He's got good volume, decent defense. He got cut pretty badly. It was near the end, so it didn't cost him anything, but it was under the right eyebrow. I don't can't guarantee it would be a fight stopper or anything, but it was in a bad spot. So again, there's some stuff there, but fight southpaw again, fights a lot of forward pressure, high volume, high pace. That is generally going to be a winning strategy. It's not gonna get you. It again has issues. It really does. But there is no such thing as a perfect style. There is no such thing as uh, a perfect fighting philosophy, if you will. There's just figuring out what works best for you. And he's got a system that pretty much works for him. So, good on him. He wasted his call out saying he wants a BMF title fight with Max Holloway. Max isn't coming back to featherweight, dude. I respect you maybe not wanting to say you're next for a title shot, but man, there's guys you could have called out that would have been very, very reasonable. You could have called out Yair Rodriguez. He might have a fight coming up, but you could have called out Diego Lopez. You could have called out. Let me have a quick look at the rankings. Man, featherweight is weird. It's a really good division, but it feels like a lot of it's invisible. You could have called out Movsar. You could have called out Aljamain Sterling, Arnold Allen, because Garcia was ranked 12 coming into this. So fighters ranked above him in the division. Let's just go from the top down. So you got Volkas Champ, Movsar, Diego Lopez, Yair Rodriguez, Lerone Murphy. Murphy seems most likely for the next title shot. So you could have called out Evloev. Aljamain Sterling, another guy you could have called out. Arnold Allen, Yusuf Salal. Brian Ortega shouldn't be ranked. He's leaving the weight class. Josh Emmett, Gian Silva, and Patricio Pitbull. Those are the guys immediately ranked above you. You would want, if I'm advising his call out, you don't want to call out Pitbull. You want to aim higher above you. You should be aiming for Josh Emmett, Brian Ortega, that kind of space. Zalal has a fight coming up, I think. But that would... No, he doesn't. I'm confusing him with somebody else. So Zalal, Allen, Ortega, Emmett. And Ortega shouldn't be there. Again, so Emmett, Sterling. Somewhere in that 5 to 9 range, I think is where I would have advised him. Get your name out there into that kind of conversation. Because saying I'd like to fight Max Holloway at this point, unless you're leaving the division, it's not happening, buddy. Max has other things to do, and frankly, so do you. So, solid win for Garcia. He's on a good winning streak, and he should be... Any of those names I mentioned, those are the guys I think he should be fighting next. Onama, tough loss. Had a pretty decent win streak. He's still talented. I feel like there's a little something missing from him, though. I mean, he had a decent win streak. The problem is, like, half of his UFC career is a little bit weird. He debuts losing to Mason Jones. No shame there. Mason Jones is pretty good. Beats Gabriel Benitez. And Mowgli was never all that great. I shouldn't say never. By the time they fought, he certainly wasn't. Beats Garrett Armfield. Okay. Loses to Nate Landwehr. He seems to struggle a little bit with pressure. Like, he's a decent counter-striker, but he likes to be an offensive counter-striker more than a defensive counter-striker, and those are two very different things. Then his 4-fight winning streak coming into this fight was Gabriel Santos, don't think he's in the UFC anymore, Jonathan Pierce, and he missed weight for that one, Roberto Romero, I don't think is still there, and Giga Chikadze. Like, the best win on his entire record in the UFC was Giga, who's slightly washed and missed weight for that fight. Onama missed weight when he fought Pierce. Giga missed weight when they fought. So he was actually taking a fairly decent step up in class, all things considered. And just a step he wasn't quite ready for. Not to mention the fact that, turns out, part of the reason I think a lot of us leaned a little bit towards Garcia. Garcia was a bad matchup for him, too. So I think he'll rebound okay. He could fight... Who should he look at? Pitbull wouldn't be a bad idea for him. Ige is not a terrible idea. And we'll have to see what he does when he gets back. But I still think there's a decent upside to Onama. Yeah. So next up, co-main event: Waldo Cortez Acosta defeats Ante Delia via knockout, solicitor punches, 3:59 of the first. Weird fight. So Delia comes out, doing kind of his usual thing, backs Cortez Acosta up a lot, and Cortez Acosta's not super happy there. Gets him to the fence, and then kind of pokes him in the eye. He actually has some good combination work before that. Cortez Acosta just kind of eats it, defends a little bit, and then, oh no, my eye. Then Delia follows up with some punches, some uppercuts, and the ref steps in. And then weirdness happens. So the referee never waves off the fight. There's a thing refs do when a fight actually ends. They wave their arms over their head. And he never does that. The assumption is this is a TKO. And it's not. And then they get Cortez Acosta on a stool. Cornermen come in. Delia's cornermen come in to celebrate with him. And the whole time it's like, no, this fight's not over. This was... The ultimate ruling by Mark Smith was correct. Stop the action because you think there's a foul. Get a replay on it, which shows the eye poke. Then we progress from there. The actual execution of it, in terms of what everyone did, how that was handled, was very, very poor. And that needs to be addressed. I don't know how. I'm not blaming it. I'm not necessarily like. I don't know what else Mark Smith. Let me rephrase this. There's things he could have done to handle this better, to be more authoritative, and saying, "Time out. We're checking the eye poke." That's kind of what I think should have happened. Unfortunately, what it felt like happened, and I can't speak to whether or not this is actually what happened. What it felt like happened to me was he stepped in to stop the fight, then wanted to make sure the stoppage was clean. Found out it wasn't, and decided to restart the fight when normally, in that case, if you stop the fight, then find out there's a foul involved, you either have to DQ the guy or make it a no contest. So that felt weird to me. That just the way that kind of played out, it felt weird. I don't know if it was. Like, I'm genuinely not sure if that's what actually happened, but that's what it felt like. So anyway, Cortez Acosta takes a little bit, decides he can continue, counters a jab with a nice right hand, drops Delia, pounds him out on the mat, and gets the stoppage. And just, again, kind of weird all the way around. Cortez Acosta then says, I want to fight for the belt. No one wants to see that. And a lot of people have done the, see, you should totally fight after being poked in the eye. Mocking Tom Aspinall. And I just have to... Cortez Acosta wasn't fighting for what Tom Aspinall was fighting for. Let's start there, yeah? If he loses that fight, Cortez Acosta, it's not great, but he's not actually losing all that much. Tom Aspinall would be losing a lot. Second, dude, Antadelli is not a bad fighter. He's not doing the kind of stuff that Cyril Gane was doing. And that is, in fact, a bit of a component here. Third, Tom Aspinall says he couldn't see. Waldo Cortez Acosta said, my vision dropped precipitously, but got to, 20 to 50%. I have a hunch that if Tom Aspinall's vision was about what Cortez Acosta claims his was, he might have continued. Like, that's not outside the realm of possibility, but if you can't see, you shouldn't fight. It's not that complicated. I still am just profoundly sad at Waldo Cortez Acosta's success. To anyone going, oh, but he just knocked out a guy. He has 3 finishes in his entire UFC run. One's over Łukasz Dreszki, and one's over Ryan Spann, and then this one. I'm not buying it, guys. I'm just not. So, yeah. This does kind of... Had Delia got that stoppage in the first round, he's real close to the title picture. So, tough loss for him. There's a healthy dose of irony in the sense that he's real tight with Tom Aspinall. So, in the aftermath of what happened between Aspinall and Gane, he said, I've been fighting for however long, I think he had 33 fights, and I've never poked someone in the eye. So he thinks they're, a little bit deliberate. And then this fight happens where he pokes Waldo Cortez Acosta in the eye. And just one of those things, man. Yeah. Welterweight up next. Jeremiah Wells defeated Temba Garimbo via unanimous decision. 29-28 across the board. First round for Garimbo, rounds 2 and 3 for Wells. Nothing super interesting here to my recollection. Weird fight next. We'll talk about it. Yadier Del Valle defeats Isaac Dulgarian via rear naked choke, 341 of the first. So I swapped my pick from Dulgarian to Del Valle for a very specific reason. So I'm covering the fights. 2-3 fights before that fight happens. Somewhere in that range, right? About an hour before. I start seeing things pop up on my X feed, my Twitter feed, right? Because that's one of the things I go through constantly while covering fights, so I can get clips and finishes and stuff like that. So I am constantly trying to like monitor that stuff. And I start seeing some stuff pop up. Now, I don't gamble, but it is impossible to talk about MMA the last couple of years and probably going forward without gambling being attached to it or propping up adjacent to it. I start seeing people say, hey, something weird's going on here with this Del Valle and Dulgarian fight. What do you mean? Well, there's a lot of money coming in on Del Valle. Now, that's not... It's entirely possible that in a vacuum, as we were getting closer to that fight, enough people looked at the plus money on Del Valle and thought, you know what, that's really good value. That's not impossible at all. But enough of it came in a really tight window that a lot of sports books stopped taking bets on this. More importantly, it wasn't just a bunch of money coming in on Del Valle. Again, you can squint and make that work. There was a lot of money apparently that came in on Del Valle round 1. Now, so much in fact that places like DraftKings closed their prop bets on that. Said we're not taking it anymore. That's a giant red flag if you don't know anything about this stuff. Apparently, the UFC was informed by the division of the FBI that monitors this stuff that there's something weird going on here. UFC had the fight anyway, because of course they did. But, yeah, that was really fishy. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself talking about the outcome, but the news about the big money consistently and the actual book, the like sports books deciding this is aberrant, this is weird, and this indicates something fishy. Now, I don't know if there was anything fishy going on here, but whatever happened was enough for those places to say something weird. This looks like something weird is going on. Now, it is not at all the first time. I've seen this before, right? I've seen when lines move that much, that quick, that's a pretty big indicator that something fishy, something like a fix is going on. Or just news has leaked out about somebody fighting with an injury, something similar to that. Like that happens. And so I decided that I'm just going to go with that. That was look, I was already, again, I'd already gone back and forth a little bit. But seeing that, like, okay, I'm going to swap that pick. Then Del Valle gets a choke, 341 of the first. And the aftermath of this is going to be telling. So a few things. One, Dulgarian is released from the UFC. Now, the UFC can cut anyone after a loss. So they've got that cover. To just say, nah, he lost and he fought badly. And he kind of did. But So they've got that cover, but they were told, guys, sports betting is federally regulated. That means screwing with it, crooked refs, insider play, all that crap, is a federal crime. Now, there's a few things about this that have caught people's attention. Again, there's a bunch of people saying this was completely fixed. I am not going to stand up here and declare with any certainty that's what happened. I don't have enough evidence. I'm going to tell you a few things. First of all, there's some stuff Isaac Dulgarian does in this fight that is confusing. He fights out of a couple of rear naked choke attempts that probably shouldn't have gotten going in the first place. Second, he'll fight the hands, so the grip gets there a couple of times. Del Valle goes palm to palm. A couple of times he tries to figure four. Each time, Dulgarian is able to grab one of the hands and kind of peel it off. Then he doesn't maintain control of the limb he just peeled off. Now, some of this is Del Valle trying to get it back, but as a general rule, if you are able to break a tight choke and you get a hold of one of the choking arms, you hang on to that thing for dear life, because it's very, very, very difficult to choke someone with one arm. You really only need control of one. And he never fought to maintain that control. Instead, he threw these crappy punches over his head. Everyone and their dog has ripped his decision. At a minimum, this is really, really, really poor decision making. Minimum. And eventually, Del Valle actually gets the choke in and gets the tap. On maybe not the best even choke attempt he had visually. Now, I can't feel what's going on in there. I can just tell you that visually, I think one of the other close choke attempts looked tighter than the one that actually got it. Now, as I said, how it looks visually is not always a great indicator of what it feels like. So that's just to the eye. So there's that. Apparently this triggered a few things going on. The FBI has come out and said that they've informed the UFC of quite a few fights that have had irregular betting at a minimum going on. I think I said around 100. That's give or take a quarter of the fights-ish, somewhere in that range. So some of those are not going. I don't think a quarter of the UFC fights are fixed or partially worked. That would be a lot. But I have no doubt that I have seen worked or fixed fights that I didn't realize at the time were worked and or fixed. Because if you know what you're doing, and you're doing this, you know how to make it not look like what it is. This didn't, I don't know. This was just weird all the way around, and now the FBI is looking into it. Apparently, and again, take this with a grain of salt, but rumor has it part of what they're going to do is audit all of Jason Herzog's fights, because he was the ref here. So we're going to have to just wait and see what comes of this, but the last time the UFC had to deal with a betting scandal, it got pretty hairy for them for a little bit, and it probably will again if there's anything to what happened here. And frankly, when a line moves the way this one moved as quickly as it did, that's a pretty big indicator of something going on. It it may not be anything. I don't have access to all the evidence. I'm just saying this felt weird. So take that for what it's worth. Welterweight next, Charles Radke defeated Daniel Frunza via rear naked choke, 429 to the third. Radke just a little bit better everywhere, especially better wrestling. Got Frunza down. Frunza, way too much just closing guard. Not enough urgency regaining his feet. Radke just kind of wore him down with wrestling, ground and pound. And kicking off the main card, Alan Nascimento had a pretty decent little fight with Cody Durden for a round and a half. And then at 3:13 of the second, Nascimento caught Durden with an anaconda choke and got him to tap out. Durden took this on like 10 days' notice. So they fought at 130, which I'm sure Nascimento was happy about anyway. That dude struggles to make 125. Durden had a good first round. Kind of the story of his career. It's a good first round, and then things struggle after that. Yeah. I like an anaconda choke, so I'm a little bit of a sucker for that. Decent win for Nascimento. On the prelims, Billy Alacana got Kevin Christian with a technical submission rear naked choke, 3:33 of the first. Chris Tognoni, the referee, just missed the tap from Christian. I'm not going to completely kill Tognoni for this one. I know kind of how this happened. He went to the side that gave him a better view of the choke, and Christian, on the other side of the body, tapped the mat, which is fine. Like, you can tap the mat to indicate your surrender, but if you do, the guy applying the submission may not necessarily know that you've tapped out, and can't even like tell the ref, hey, he's tapping. And so the referee just, again, kind of screwed the pooch on that one. Not going to completely kill him, but needs to be said out loud. He blew that call. He should have seen that earlier. Yeah. Bantamweight Timmy Kwamba defeated Chong Ho Lee via unanimous decision, 29-28. Lee with a pretty good first round. Gets the back for the vast majority of it, with the body triangle and the backpack, but that's pretty taxing on the legs. If you have not conditioned your legs isometrically for that, it will take it out of you. Then second and third round, Kwamba did a better job of counter wrestling, getting on top and working from there, so good win for him. Dante Johnson got Cedricus Dumas with a ninja choke, 125 of the second, not a whole lot there. Norma Dumont defeated Ketlin Vieira via split decision. What a weird fight this was, 29-28. So I scored this for Vieira, but the fight kind of goes as follows. Round 1 to Dumont, not too much controversy there. Am I getting that backwards? No, I think round 1 went to Vieira without too much controversy, and then round 3 to Dumont. Let me double check my scoring on that, as I don't wish to get that backwards. Yeah, first round Vieira, not a whole lot of controversy there. Round 3 Dumont, not a whole lot of controversy there. On the feet, generally Dumont's doing the better work, but not by a giant metric. She's not super active. When they hit the ground, Vieira's better, but Vieira's actual like damaging work from there isn't great. She wins the first round because she gets really good positions and actually has a couple of decent submission attacks. But the second round then becomes the swing round, and Vieira has top control for chunks of it. But it's like the back little bit of the second, after she was outstruck on the feet for the first bit of the round. Not hugely, but apparently enough. Yeah, again, I scored this for Vieira. I can see the Dumont scorecard, especially with a lot of judges now apparently like really weighing damage over control. So if you get someone down, you better do something with it. And apparently, to two of the judges' cage side, Vieira didn't do enough with her top position to offset losing the striking for I'd say the majority of the first round. I think it was over the halfway point for the round. So take that for what it's worth. Ironically, again, Norma Dumont in the lead up to this said she's tired of decisions and wants to start finishing people, which is just kind of funny. I mean, Dumont hasn't had a finish. She has never finished anyone in the UFC. In fact, she only has 2 finish wins in her entire career. She has 13 wins, 11 of them are decisions. She has 2 sub wins on her career in her first and third fight. And then you get a really dubious decision here. I don't know. So, in theory, the winner here gets like towards the title picture, but man, this division is so bad. And I don't know. First of all, let's just see what happens with Kayla and Nunes. Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes, because Kayla Harrison can't make bantamweight too many more times. That is a horrific weight cut for her. I mean, for crying out loud, she competed in judo at like 170, give or take. Now she's down fighting at that's ugh. Again, it is a brutal, brutal, brutal weight cut for her. So she can't do that regularly. I don't know how many more of those she's got in her. But I mean, you had like 4 and 5 here in the ranks fighting. You're buried in the middle of the prelims in a dead spot because nobody cares, including the UFC and their matchmakers. Strawweight next. Alice Ardolian defeated Montserrat Ruiz via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Decent stuff from Ardolian here, but I mean, Ruiz is not very good, so Welterweight, Seokhyun Ko defeated Phil Rowe via unanimous decision, 30-26 once and then 2 30-27s. Rowe is a big welterweight, but Ko did a good job here. Showed enough of the striking to get respect, and then used the wrestling, good ground and pound, how you use it properly. Some good stuff from Ko. I mean, dude upset Oban Elliott in his UFC debut. I did not pick him to win that fight. Got a good win here. Ko could be going places. And kicking everything off, Talita Alencar defeated Ariane Carnelose via rear naked choke, 4:36 of the third. Alencar just struggles a bit down the stretch. Her gas tank gave her problems in round 2. She kind of, I'd say, lucked into the winning position in the third, but wee bit. Capitalizing on some choices Carnelose made that Carnelose did not have to. But Alencar's jiu-jitsu is good. Her takedowns need work. Her striking, she's got an okay right hand, but her combination work is lacking too. So, that was the card. It was not great. Bonuses, you may have heard, that you may have picked up, there was no fight of the night. Might have given it personally to Nascimento and Durden. So instead, they gave several performance bonuses. One to Steve Garcia, fine. One to Waldo Cortez Acosta, one to Alon Nascimento, thumbs up. And one to Dante Johnson. So this is one of those, like, kind of get a finish, get a bonus things. Apart from Del Valle, because they couldn't give that a bonus. They just, no. So, that's where we were. It was not a great card. But you can find my full report in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. If you feel so inclined, go give that a read. I always appreciate that. Alrighty, let's move on then, shall we, to UFC on ESPN 73. This will once again be in the warehouse, because that's not going anywhere anytime soon, apparently. Man, the fact that apparently a giant part of the UFC not going to Netflix is Netflix just saying, we don't want your crap. we're happy to have your big fights, but we don't want your weekly slop. And they went, well, hey, Paramount, you'll give us $1 billion a year for the slop. So slop it up we shall. Anyway. So main event, Gabriel Bonfim and Randy Brown. This is a main event on ESPN. What in the world are we doing here? Yeah, I don't know what we're doing here. I really don't. Okay. So Gabriel Bonfim, 3-fight winning streak, coming off a split decision win over Stephen Thompson. He was kind of lucky to get that. I mean, look, he had a good couple of fights in the UFC, beating Munir Lazzez and then Trevin Giles. Then he stepped up to Nicholas Dalby, and Nicholas Dalby beat him up in the clinch, gassed him out, and finished him in the second round. Then he rebounded by beating Angelosa and Chaos Williams, as mentioned, and neither of them are super elite. And then Old Man Thompson gave him some problems. And now he's here in a main event because they like him and against Randy Brown, who's kind of just been hanging around for a really long time. Randy Brown's UFC debut was in 2016, by the way. You may have forgotten that. They were on Fox at the time. He fought Matt Dwyer. So Randy Brown's been here for a minute. I mean, almost 10 years. In fact, it was January 30th of 16. If he survives whatever happens after this fight, he will probably get to the 10-year mark. He's got more wins than losses, but the losses, they do stand out a little bit. Lost to Michael Graves, as I mentioned. Won a couple. Lost to Bilal Muhammad, future champion. Not going to hold that against him. Beat Mickey Gall. Lost to Nico Price. Nico Price got him with hammer fists from the bottom, sort of. That was wild. Won a couple, then lost to Vicente Luque, then went on a decent win streak of 4 in a row. Alex Oliveira, Jared Gooden, Cass Williams, and Francisco Trinaldo. No world beaters there, but solid names. And then lost to Jack Della Maddalena. Once again, future champion, so not going to hold it too much against him. 3-fight winning streak. Pretty decent stuff there. Wellington Turman, Muslim Salikov, and Elijah Zaleski dos Santos. Then he loses a split decision to Brian Battle. I agreed that Battle won that fight, if memory serves. And then most recently knocked out Nicholas Dalby in a rematch. Not a rematch? No. We were talking about Dalby earlier, I think. Yeah. That was a decent fight. So Brown's, he rarely... I'm usually happy to watch him fight when he shows up on a card, but putting him in a main event is iffy. The odds like Bonfim, not huge, but they're leaning his way, minus 180, give or take. If this were 3 rounds, I would go with Bonfim. The question is, does the other 2 rounds play much of a factor? Brown can be wrestled. And Bonfim will almost certainly make an effort to do so. That is a weird one. Okay, I'm going to go with Bonfim now, but I'm going to asterisk this one. I need to rewatch. There's 2 things I need to look for. I need to look at Randy Brown's work on the fence, because his defensive work on the fence is pretty good, but I need to see how well he gets off of it. And I need to see Bonfim's, again, a little bit of his fence work. I just got to kind of refamiliarize myself with. There's a bit of a physical discrepancy here. Right? Randy Brown's kind of a long dude for the division. He's 6'3", 68 inches of reach. Bonfim, 6'1", 72. Okay, not that big. It's in Brown's favor, but it's not huge. Yeah, again, let me go with Bonfim because he's got the odds, but this one is... Don't hold this one pretty much anyway. There's a couple of things kind of nitpicky I got to look at. Flyweights in your co-main event, Matt Schnell and Joseph Morales. Matt Schnell is washed. Dude's 35, coming off a win over Jimmy Flick, who was just more washed. He was on a 3-fight losing streak before that. Got stopped by Matthews Nicolau and Steve Erceg, and then choked out by Cody Durden. I just don't know that I can pick Schnell at this point. And I like Schnell, but he's 35. It is flyweight, and he's just started reacting badly to damage. And then you got Morales on the other side, who's only 31. In his second UFC stint, so he comes into the UFC in 2017, goes 1-2. It was a swift exit for him. And it was 2018. They were kind of looking like folding the division at that point. So he, again, beats Roberto Sanchez in his debut, then loses to Davison Figueiredo, future champion, twice over. Then drops a split decision to Eric Shelton and is given the boot. Since then, 4 wins in a row. He took some time off. He is cut from the UFC in like 2018. Doesn't fight again until 21. But since coming back again, 4 in a row, including a return to the UFC in 2000 and earlier this year actually, when he beat Albidi Idris with a triangle choke. So yeah, that was a good. I remember that fight. It was a pretty nice return to form for him. He was an underdog there too for some reason. People give way too much credence to what happens on the show, I guess. I think I picked Morales there too. I'd have to double check, but it doesn't matter that much. Anyway, I think Schnell. Again, I respect his career, but I think he's washed at this point, and I don't think Morales is. So yeah, going with Morales there. Welterweight next, Muslim Salikov and Uroš Medic. This is not a bad fight. Here's the thing, Medic almost always gets hit and dropped in the first round, and if you can't finish him there, he'll come back and he will probably do a number on you. If you can, well, then he loses. And Salikov has pretty good power, still pretty athletic. He's 41, so he's not what he used to be, mind you, but he's on a 3-fight winning streak. Back-to-back performance of the night wins. The Carlos Leal win was actually quite impressive. I did not like his chances in that fight, but he got it done. So I can see arguments for both sides of this one. Odds are with Medic. I'm actually going to go with Salikov. I may seriously regret this, but Medic, the strategy of I don't really get my defense in order until after I get hit and hurt really badly is just a poor one against Salikov. So that's where I'm going. Lightweight next, Chris Padilla and Ishmael Bonfim. Seems like a little, not a full-on gimme, but they're trying to set up both of the Bonfim brothers a little bit here. So Padilla, Taco, right? Yeah, 16-6, 6-fight winning streak, 3-0 in the UFC. Pretty decent overall fighter, and I do think Ishmael Bonfim is probably the lesser of the two. He had a good UFC debut when he beat Terrence McKinney, but then lost to Benoit Saint-Denis. He beat Vince Pichel, not bad, and then lost to Nazim Sadikov, so he's been much more up and down than Gabriel. If you don't mind an underdog bet, then there's some decent value to be had with Padilla. I'm going to respect the odds and go with Bonfim here, but again, Bonfim has been a little bit up and down. Now, some of those guys are just really, really good fighters that have given him problems, but um, Padilla's a pretty solid overall guy, so worth considering there. Bantamweight next, Ricky Simone and Hani Barcelos. Ricky Simone, the last guy to beat Merab Dvalishvili. Just broke a three-fight losing streak earlier this year when he beat Javid Bashrat. Beat Cameron Smotherman most recently. That was back in June. His losing streak was Song Yadong, Mario Bautista, and Vinicius Oliveira. Those are three top-end guys, actually. Song is pretty well regarded. Bautista's really good. And, Lock Dog is Lock Dog. Barcelos, a little bit past it, 38. There was a time when he was actually quite good. And then he hit a rough patch. Some of that was, he had some tough fights. So 3-fight winning streak at the moment. Christian Quinones, Peyton Talbot, and Cody Garbrandt. So one unproven guy and one really washed guy. Simone will try to wrestle with Barcelos. Barcelos is pretty good at wrestling, but I don't think Barcelos can match Simone's kind of consistent pace is part of the problem there. So I'll go with Simone. There was a time this would have been actually a really good fight. I think we're just like at least 3 years past that point, if not more. And kicking off the main card, Christian Leroy Duncan takes on Marco Tulio. Seems like a fairly... The odds like Tulio. Hang on. Let me have a look at this gentleman. Oh, your face is familiar. 14-1, 10-fight winning streak. 2-0 in the UFC, wins over Ihor Potieria and Trishan Gore. So here's the problem, man. You've beaten guys who aren't that good. And now you're fighting someone who is pretty good. I don't know. I don't think Duncan's a world beater, but he's pretty good. Duncan's 12-2. 2-fight winning streak, 5-2 in the UFC. His UFC losses are to Armin Petrosian and Gregory Rodriguez. There actually was a little bit of something about the way that Eric Anders fight went that... Okay, I can see that tracks a little bit. I'm going to double check. I got to rewatch a Tulio fight. So for the moment, I'll go with the odds, but that one's getting an asterisk too. All right. Next up, Haider Emil and Jamal Emmers. Emil's at least usually fun. Coming off a loss to Jose Miguel Delgado. Was undefeated before that, so he's 11-1, 3-1 in the UFC. 2 stoppages, 1 split decision win over William Gomez. He should not have gotten that decision, by the way. So he's usually fun, if nothing else. And Emmers, up and down his entire UFC run. Geez, lost to Giga Chikadze, beat Vince Cachero, lost to Pat Sabatini, beat Husseini Ashkabov, lost to Jack Jenkins, beat Dennis Bazookia, lost to Nate Landwehr, beat Gabriel Miranda. If that pattern holds, he's losing here. I think Emil probably bounces back from that loss. But if you want one on the undercard to circle that is probably going to be action, Haider Emil is almost never in a boring fight, at least. So I'll go with Emil. The pattern holding for Emmers is just the funnier outcome. Bantamweight next, Adrian Yanez and Christian Quinones. Boy, Yanez had a lot of hype at one point. Then Rob Font kind of put... The Rob Font loss was recoverable. That exposed a few problems, but the Jonathan Martinez loss... Look, I think pretty highly of Martinez, so... I'm not saying losing to him was, completely devastating, but it really showed some problems with his. of his. He beat Vinicius Salvador after that, but then dropped a split decision to Daniel Marcos. I kind of agreed with Marcos winning that. Quinones, on the other hand, 18-5. 1-2 in the UFC. Beat Khalid Taha, but back-to-back losses to Kyung Ho Kong and Hani Barcelos. They're trying to rehab Yanez a little bit, I think, and I tend to think that's what's going to happen. That said, if Yanez stumbles here, that would be real bad for him. Women's bantamweight next, ranked again, buried in the middle of the prelims. Mayra Buena Silva and Jacqueline Cavalcante. So Buena Silva, had a title shot. Remember that? Boy, that fight sucked out loud, didn't it? Yeah, she hasn't won a fight since 2023. She got a win over Holly Holm, but that was changed to a no contest. Slightly dubious one at that. Like the drug test she failed for was not a performance enhancer in the traditional sense of the word, but not going to litigate that. Then she lost to Raquel Pennington in a terrible fight for the title, vacant title. Then she lost to Macy Chasson. She got a giant cut opened up on. Like she was actually fighting pretty well, but got a horrible cut opened up. It was a fair stoppage. Then most recently, she tried her hand at flyweight and gassed out against Jasmine Jasdavicius and dropped enough rounds to lose. So she's back up at bantamweight. And Cavalcante has actually been doing some decent work. She's 9-1. She's getting the step up here. She's had some split decision wins that should not have been split, but, judges. The Josiane Nunes fight had no right being split. Frankly, neither did the Nora Cronole fight. She beat Julia Avila back in February, so she's getting a big step up here, actually. At least in terms of ranking and name value. I don't know what Buena Silva's got going on at this point. She's probably still dangerous, but Cavalcante has the momentum. And frankly, I've seen enough of Mayra Buena Silva. So let me go with Cavalcante and we'll just see what happens. Heavyweight, God, who cares? Josh Hokett and Max Jimenez. So Hokett, this is his UFC debut. He's 6-0. Had a couple of fights in Bellator, a few fights in the LFA. It's respectable. Just hard to get a real handle on a guy that, young in his career. Former football player, apparently. Jimenez, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's last name. I apologize, I'm probably doing it wrong. 6-1, 4-fight winning streak, also coming into his UFC debut. All right, I am just going to go with the odds on this one. Odds like Hokett, fine, hang on. I'm going to go with the odds at the time of the fight. I don't imagine they'll change that much between now and then, but if they swap, that's my pick there. We'll just go with the odds, whatever they are when the cage door closes. I will live and die with that one, and I have a new designation in my spreadsheet for that, so I know which one that is. Bantamweight, Miles Johns and Daniel Marcos. Johns is generally a pretty decent fighter, coming off a split decision loss to John Matsumoto. I think I scored that for Matsumoto. Don't quote me on that, though. Lost to Felipe Lima before that. Johns is good, but he's another one of those guys who, like, really struggles after the first round a little bit because he puts forth so much effort. He's got decent hands, a little bit of a wrestling background, but, like, his wrestling is designed for the amateur time frame, not an MMA time frame. And if you know anything about the timing of amateur wrestling bouts, you'll understand what I mean by that. Then Daniel Marcos, coming off of his first loss to Montel Jackson. Marcos is good, but can get stuck not doing enough. Which is also true of Miles Johns, coincidentally. I tend to favor Marcos in fights like this, so let me go with Marcos. And Marcos has skill, but one of those guys who kind of struggles to really put it all together. Strawweight, Tisha Pennington and Denise Gomes. Once again, I'm going to say who cares. Pennington, 2-fight winning streak. She beat Carla Esparza and Luana Pinheiro. Gomes, let's see, 3-fight winning streak. Split decision over Eduardo Mora. Beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Stopped Elise Reed. Gomes has decent power, but Pennington moves a lot. And that gives Gomes some problems. I don't know. Pennington also has not looked super great her last couple of times. Let me go with Gomes, but I don't feel great about that. This is the kind of fight that the better to best versions of Tisha Pennington could win. So just throwing that out there. And kicking everything off, we have Jason McVeigh and Robert Valentin, or Jackson McVeigh, excuse me. What a terrible fight. What just a terrible, terrible fight. Odds are with Valentin. Valentin's what, 0-2 in the UFC? 0-3. Lost to Ryan Loader, Torres, Finney, and Ateba Gautier. They fed this guy to Gautier. That was almost unethical. The Finney fight being split because Torres Finney is, golly, the way he fights. McVeigh lost his UFC debut to Bruno Ferreira. Yeah, let me go with Valentin, I guess, but how could you care about that fight at all? Alright, that's it. That's the card. Man, I am not excited about that fight on paper. There's a couple of fights there that I think do look okay, but man, oh man. Just nothing really there. Alright, news, because I've been going for an hour, and I don't think there was much of anything that deserved it. But, well, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So the news that I think is most relevant to the fight sports world at the moment, there was a lawsuit filed against Gervonta Tank Davis. This is yet another allegation of domestic violence. And apparently this is causing MVP Promotions, so Jake Paul and whatnot, to examine replacing Davis for the fight with Jake Paul. I don't even know what to say at this point. This was going to be one of the bigger fights of the year. It's going to be on Netflix. And Gervonta Davis is just unable to get out of his own way. Jake Paul and MVP Promotions being forced to pretend that they care because of the public spectacle of it is kind of funny. And now they're looking for someone to fight Jake Paul, apparently. So we might be looking at a Nate Diaz rematch. I don't know. I don't know. We don't actually have a confirmation that that fight is off as currently stands, or of who might be replacing Tank. So more on that as it becomes relevant. But at this point, he's probably going to get some former MMA fighter to step in there because on a on a truncated timetable, which is what they'll be dealing with, any boxer kind of worth their salt is not accepting those terms. So there we are. That's what we got. All right, that's it for the news that I have here. Let me check the old social medias for anything news related. If there's nothing there, we'll do plugs and then get out of here. All right, nope, I don't see anything new there, so let's get into plugs. Let's see. Last week, Mark Radulich and I reviewed Springsteen, Deliver Me from Nowhere over on Damn You Hollywood. It's a thing. Jeremy Allen White does good acting. I have almost nothing of interest to say about anything else in that movie. Felt like a waste of time. This week, Monday, we will be having an on trial, sort of, a compare and contrast, if you will, between the two versions of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, because there was nothing else to talk about, apparently. Then Thursday, I may or may not be contributing to this one. There's a triple feature of 3 Arnold Schwarzenegger movies: Commando, Last Action Hero, and True Lies. So that's mostly Mark and Sean, but I think they've opened that one up. So I'm going to have a look-see, and I certainly know the material of those 3 well enough to comment and talk about it. So we'll see. I may or may not be over there. Professional wrestling on the usual date and time. So SmackDown this Friday. Then the UFC event on Saturday. Tune in for that. We'll be back here next week to review UFC on ESPN 73, and we will preview UFC 322, Della Maddalena versus Makhachev. Also on that card, Valentina Shevchenko defends against Zhang Weili. Sean Brady and Michael Morales is a good fight. Leon Edwards and Carlos Praches is fine. Dariush and Benoit Saint-Denis is fine. The prelims, Bo Nickel and Rodolfo Vieira is okay. Kopylov and Gregory Rodriguez will be good. I don't think I care about most of the rest of this. Nah, not really. Chepe Mariscal's fighting. He's going to be fighting Pat Sabatini. I like Chepe. It's a tough fight for him, though, because Sabatini is just clinch, takedown, grappling, and Chepe is very much not that, so. Full preview next week, but that's a decent card. The pay-per-view portion, at least, is, at the moment, solid. All right, that's it for me. Thank you all very, very much for listening, as always. I will see you next week. Until then, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.